This episode is proudly supported by Pepe Sayer Australian Cultured Butter.
At Pepe Sayer, we focus on quality. So if someone comes into your restaurant and they see you're using Pepe Sayer, they know immediately that that is a quality product you've got in front of you on the table. And that comes from a decade of just doing quality butter day after day.
For more information, go to pepesayer.com.au.
It just so happened that they were looking for a new head chef at Yellow at that time. So he offered me that job and off we went. And then 2 months later, we were in lockdown.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. You never know what the future might hold. The global nature of our society and the opportunities around the globe for those in hospitality can lead you to just about anywhere and into areas you may not have considered. Sander Nooij is the head chef of Yellow in Sydney. Sander, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, mate. It's good to catch up with you. You're at the helm of, one of the most influential vegetarian restaurants in Australia. What's it feel like being in that position?
Yeah, I'm not sure. First of all, we have transitioned into being completely vegan after the pandemic. So just a little correction. Yeah, which was sort of a way for us to make it easier for ourselves at first. Like we came back with like a whole tasting menu and we said, let's just focus on vegan first and then maybe we can go back to vegetarian later. But we were vegan and it was very interesting to just cook vegan. So we kept it that way, You mentioned that it was easier to go vegan, and I don't think many people would perceive it that way. Tell us a bit about that transition and why it's so much easier. Well, it wasn't so much that the cooking itself was easier. It was just easier for us to come back. Look, of course, you I know that you talked a lot about the pandemic. Of course, there was a whole time where it was difficult to figure out exactly how much stuff you could put on and what costs were involved or whatever. So we wanted to come back basically with one menu rather than with two menus to make it easier on ourselves in that respect. Tell us a bit about what sort of impact this role has had on you and your approach to cookery. Look, it's a very nice role for me because I get a lot of freedom to do what I want to do. Like I'm not sure if there's a lot of head chefs in Sydney that have as much freedom to explore what they want to explore themselves. So in that sense, I can explore whatever I want to do. Like I like to do a lot of fermentation, for example. So I built a very interesting setup to make goji and grow goji and those sort of things. I wanted to smoke things, so I built a smoker. Like those. Like I'm very free in how I approach things in that sense. I mean, as a person, I'm not sure if I've changed much. like I'm still who I am. I don't know. I don't think that the role itself has changed me much as a person. It's just that I can explore culinarily basically wherever I want to go, as far as it's vegan, of course. Did you have to rethink dish construction, having come from a world where you're using proteins and meats? Tell us a bit about sort of that transition for you and your approach with the vegan. Well, it's hard. It's hard because when you cook with meat or with fish, like no matter if it is a main component or you just use it as a seasoning, like there's so much flavor coming out of that, and it's almost always becomes the center of the dish, And it is sometimes hard to find the center of a dish when you're just working with vegetables. Or look, you're not working just with vegetables. You're working with all things of the plant kingdom, right? So you work with legumes and you work with mushrooms and you work with vegetables, like everything. But it's sometimes hard to find focus. It is hard, And we're still. Look, I'm cooking for 15 years or whatever. It's still. I'm still sometimes sometimes still things don't work as easily as if you would, for example, have a piece of mackerel or whatever, and like it's very easy to cook with that and make it delicious. Like you can do whatever with it. That is not the same with a sweet. It's more difficult with a sweet to find flavor in it and make it interesting.
Tell us a little bit about the menu at the moment. Is there a dish or two that you can tell us about that kind of exemplifies sort of where you've landed with your food?
We make a dish that I find interesting. I'm not sure if it's the most interesting dish for the people to eat, but I find it the most interesting. We make a dish which is basically, so I make different types of misos, right? So we have a broad bean miso that I made, I don't know, a year ago or whatever, that is particularly good. And we've worked a bit with like nut culturing and cheese production with nuts or whatever. It almost never really works, but we soak cashews for overnight and then blitz it until it's really smooth. And then we culture it with basically any lacto culture. So we use a turnip ferment at the moment, just some water of that. We culture it overnight at whatever in the koji chamber, so it'd be like 29 degrees, and that sours the curd, or the paste, basically the nut paste that you make. And then we mix the broad bean miso inside of that paste. So we have 2/3 of the nut and 1/3 of the miso, and that becomes like a savory curd. And then we grow sprouts out of 3 different seeds. That was just something that I wanted to do because I liked the idea that we produce our own food, that we grow our own food. And we dress that with a dressing made with shio-koji that we always have on hand. And this oil that we made out of celeriac leaves that we had on a different menu. So we got the celeriac in and we just used to make an oil just to not waste it. And some really nice Japanese vinegar because it's really nice. And that we serve that with some sprouts from Nooij. You might know Nooij. He grows these wonderful sprouts in Barangaroo under the ground. It's like this really sustainable farm that we really like to support. And then we serve it with this pumpernickel bread, which is based on a recipe from Tartine Bakery. I think most people will know him. And that bread was basically the genesis of the dish because we wanted to find something to serve with that bread because that bread is absolutely phenomenal. That is another whole story, how to make that bread with sprouts and all sort of things. But that bread is just astounding. So we basically serve the curd with these sprouts to put on the bread and then eat as a starter, And I think that is quite an interesting dish to eat and also to make,
Tell us a bit about making a balanced menu in the realms of vegan, because you guys, it's not just a vegan restaurant. You guys are really pushing the realm of gastronomy against sort of all of the best restaurants in Australia. How do you make a balanced menu?
Yeah, that's a bit hard. It is a bit hard. Like you still work with the same principles still apply. You start really light and you go heavier, Like those same principles still apply. It is sometimes a little bit hard to figure out, for some people that are used to eat a lot of meat, it's very hard for them to feel satiated if they don't have that hit of meat, and that is something that is a little bit difficult. And so you want to give people enough food, but not too much food. And that is something that we sometimes struggle with a little bit. Like we just changed the menu like a couple of weeks ago. And I think for some people it was not quite enough. So I have increased portions or changed some things around a little bit to address that, But other than that, it is not much different than cooking meat or fish. Like you want a natural progression in both the quantity of food that's on the plate and on the way that it the heaviness of it. So you start with like a little salad or like with a lot of greens or a lot of acidity, and you slowly transition into something with a lot more umami and fat. And then, of course, you end sweet because I like sweet. so yeah, sweet. Yeah, yeah.
I want to explore how you approach sweets and what you're doing there at Yellow Bistro a bit further on. But take us back to when you were young. Where did you grow up, and what sort of role did food play in your family?
Yeah, that's actually quite interesting. I grew up on a little island in the top north of Holland. It's tiny. It's 60 kilometers around. And it is actually quite interesting because when I grew up, food was not a big thing on the island at all. I don't come from a family that was heavily involved in food. We didn't actually ever go out for dinner. We didn't have a lot of money, so I mean, I'm not complaining about that. Don't get me wrong, but like that was just not part of our experience basically. Like I spent my whole summer on the beach every year. Like it was a little island with a really long, like one side of the island is one long white beach. You know, yeah. So we had a little hut on the beach, and that's where I spent my entire childhood summers. We were always on the beach, you know. And then one time a year we would go out on the restaurant that was on the beach, but that was at that point in time not just nothing like schnitzels or I don't know steak with some sauce, but the steaks that time came from like vacuum sealed bags that came in frozen, you know, which was still true when I started to cook like on the beach when I was like whatever 17 or whatever or 18. And that was just a summer job, you know. That has changed completely now. Like one guy. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent, but there's a guy called Jeff who opened a restaurant when I was I don't know. I must have been when I was 14, but you know he was the first one to really go and work with produce off the island and basically take what was happening already in the world onto the island. And at some point he achieved a Michelin star. And that changed like everything. Like it really changed it really changed things on the island. So like right now there are like I don't know 10 really good restaurants that are doing amazing things. I had to go back to Holland in the pandemic because my dad was dying. But I was there for 3 months, 2 months, 3 months, and I worked with a really good childhood friend of mine who took over this beach restaurant, you know, and he changed it into something that was unrecognizable to what was there before. Like it was still a restaurant where people are eating from morning all the way into the evening. You know, it's open all day. But another childhood friend of mine started a coffee roastery on the island, and he serves the coffee that this guy roasts on the beach, you know, and that rivals any Sydney coffee shop. Like it's a proper espresso machine. The coffee is roasted freshly. It's absolutely amazing. Then he is super sustainable. Has one of those composters, you know, that I think Matt Stone started to use here, and then or Joost Buck or whatever. And so all the disposables are compostable and are composted on the beach and then given out to patrons, you know, like it was astounding. A lot of food was locally produced. It was unbelievable. But that was all not the case when I was growing up. So I didn't really grow up with food at all. I was sort of pushed still to go more in academic direction than go toward the kitchen, you know. And then I did a year of university at some stage. Really, really didn't enjoy that. And then I was always quite fascinated with the kitchen, and I thought maybe that's I had worked on the beach for about a year, and this guy from Amsterdam came in. His name is René, and he really showed me how interesting cooking can be. You know, like all the things he did, he started to work on the beach as well with like the lamb from the island. With, you know, with like he made this dish. I remember this. He made this dish for a special event where he just got lamb chops, and I think he just put them in panko. Maybe he made a little bit mousseline and put them in panko and fried them. And then he made like 2 different coulis, one green, one black, because that is like the flag of the island, you know. But for me back then, that was like so cool. I thought it was amazing, you know. I'd never seen those things. I also never eaten the food that he made. Like it was so tasty, you know. It was quite incredible. And then after I did a year of university, I didn't like that. I got in touch with like some, you know, via an aunt. She knew someone that was really embedded in the fine dining scene of Amsterdam. And I managed to secure a job in this like little 1-star, incredibly strict French restaurant. and that really made me fall in love with that whole industry, because it wasn't just about the food. It was also, look, it was hard. I worked long hours, and the chef was known in Amsterdam as being a very hard chef. But he was also a very interesting person. And the restaurant was owned by two guys that used to be like a couple, but they were not a couple anymore. They had separated, but still owned the restaurant together. The restaurant was open for 12 years at that stage, and they became sort of mentors for me, like they were incredible people. Yeah. I mean, look, they pushed me to my limit in the kitchen, but then after service every night, it was old school. Every service after every service, we would sit down, have a drink, talk, and they were also very well read, so they gave me books to read. It was an incredible time. Yeah.
How did you end up in Australia?
So after Amsterdam, I went to live in Prague.
Wow.
Then in Italy, and then in London. That whole that process took about 8 years or whatever.
Wow.
7 years.
Tell us a bit about that.
7 years. Yeah. Well, we can go back there. And then when I was in London, I wanted to go to Mexico. That was my plan. And somebody said, before you're 30, it's very easy to go to Australia. So I did, and then I went to Australia, and I wanted to go to Key. That was my original plan. That for whatever reason didn't work. Like at that stage, I didn't pursue it very, 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 very strongly as well. I sent them an email, and that probably got spam box or whatever, and I never really followed up. So it's not really it's not a very strong. But I also applied to Gastropark, and. So I started to work for Gastropark, which is another kitchen that is famous for being an interesting place to be in. And I really found my tribe there. Like I fell in with some people that I really, really liked. And then I did my farm work, and I loved my farm work. And then and then you start to do the whole visa procedure, and you just get locked into that. So I stayed, and now I'm Now I'm locked in. I'm almost a citizen now. So,
well, before we explore sort of your time in Australia, you briefly mentioned Italy and Prague and a few other places. Tell us a bit about life in the kitchens there.
Yeah, so Prague. I had a girlfriend that time, a Czech girl, and she was just about to embark on her PhD in biochemistry, and we decided to either, I think the choice was Heidelberg or Prague. And it was so that a chef that I knew in Amsterdam knew the head chef of the Four Seasons in Prague. And I went there for a trial, and I was just amazed by it. I had never seen anything like it. Like the kitchen in Amsterdam was a tiny little like dungeon, like right next to a kennel, and it was like it was perfect, but it was great to be there. I mean, probably one of the nicest places I've ever worked. But in Prague, it was like this grand hotel kitchen with several levels, and there was a butchery inside of the hotel, and it was so big. And then, so we moved to Prague, and then about 3 months in, the head chef, or the executive chef of the Four Seasons Hotel changed from a guy called Vito Mollica to a guy called Andrea Accordi. And he was a bit of a superstar chef from Italy. Quite young, I think he was 37 at the time, 35, 37. And he still is very, very good. Like his cooking is very technical. We used like the most incredible produce from all over Europe. And it was a joy to be in that kitchen, like, absolute joy. Yeah, I learned so much, like so much there. And then, so I was there for about 3 years, and then my girlfriend and I broke up, and Andrea arranged the position for me. Like by that time, it was actually very interesting. We got the only Michelin star of all post-communistic Europe, like there, yeah, which is quite an achievement, I think. And then I went to Italy because Andrea knew executive chef of like somewhere in Italy, in Ravello, which is like this little town on the Amalfi Coast. Absolutely gorgeous. Like you can see the whole Amalfi Coast from that town. It's like in the hills. It was very, very nice. Yeah. And so I worked there for a season, which was about 9 or 10 months. And then I went to London because the guy, the executive chef of that place, he knew someone in London who was at Harrods. Now, that was a bit of an intermission to be at Harrods because like Harrods is a big department store, you know. Look, it was a lot of fun being there, but I was there for about half a year, I'm going to say, before I needed to do something else again. So then I started to work for Jason Atherton in Pollen Street Social in London, which had just opened, I think, for about 2 months then. So Jason was in the kitchen all the time. It was intense. Like it was an intense restaurant to work in. Yeah, like it was busy, like very, very busy. Yeah, and the standards were like they could just not drop. It was very exacting. Everything was, yeah, it was it was good. Yeah, it was good restaurant. Yeah, good restaurant to eat in. I think it was a bit hard to work in, but I think to eat in it's great. Yeah, and then I moved on. I really wanted to do pastry, so I did a couple of trials. Ended up to work for a place called Brasserie Zedel, which is a massive, like, I don't know if you've been there in London. It's this massive underground French brasserie. It's absolutely gorgeous, but it was not like in any way a Michelin stars sort of thing. But the pastry kitchen was run by this guy called Jamie, who was also a drum and bass DJ. We had another guy who was then the sous chef. Like I became pastry sous chef pretty quick, but when I walked in, there was another Brazilian guy who was also a cage fighter. And like it was a little English boy who became after he left there, he became a master chocolatier. Did the London Olympics. What is the chocolate or the pastry Olympics or whatever, as a chocolatier, and now he teaches at the what's it called, the Gordon Bleu, pastry de Gordon Bleu. We had a Brazilian girl who was a pharmacist in Brazil and wanted to do pastry, and somebody who used to be a lawyer. So it was a very colorful team. It was an incredibly colorful team, and I've never laughed as much as in that kitchen. We made everything there. Like sometimes we did 1,000 covers a day, but everything was made in house. All the ice creams, all the pastry shells, all the cakes, everything, all the opera cakes, everything was made there. So it was a lot. But we had 7 people in the pastry team, you know. So it was doable. Yeah.
You mentioned that someone suggested you come to Australia. When you got here, were you surprised by the restaurants and the culinary landscape?
No. Look, of course I landed in Sydney. And Sydney is, in many respects, just a metropole, you know? So I think, like, if you would go from Sydney to any other, like, Western metropole, you'd fall into a very similar scene, you know. That's, of course, there's differences. Like London is way bigger, you know, but also there's also a lot of similarities. Like there's good restaurants with good people that just want to cook good food, you know, and care for the guest. And I think those principles are the same here as they are in London or they are in Amsterdam, you know.
You ended up finding that job at Key. How did that come about?
So I did my farm work in Tamworth because you have to for your visa, right? I had an incredible time working on a cattle farm / horse riding school. I learned how to ride a horse. I cooked over fire every day, you know, like we killed lamb on the farm for our own food. Like we shot kangaroo and rabbits for to eat. There was no phone reception. It was in the middle of nowhere. It was absolutely amazing. Yeah, I was lucky with that. And then I went to Broome, where I spent, 3 months or whatever, helping somebody opening a cafe. Went all the way back, and I was planning to stay in Melbourne for a bit, but I couldn't quite find what I was looking for. So I came back to Sydney, and then emailed Key again. And this time I got a response. And it was, look, yeah, I felt pretty happy there. Like it was a good. There are good working conditions at Key. Of course, it's an absolutely iconic kitchen to work in, and I needed sponsorship to stay here, and they offered sponsorship pretty quickly. So there we go.
How, how different was the kitchen at Key compared to what you had been used to in Europe?
Look, it was. I think I hadn't really worked in kitchens like that. That are these big kitchens with. Now maybe Prague was a bit similar, but still in Prague we had less chefs to achieve what we needed to do with. Like at Key at Key there's a lot of people in the kitchen. I think it's totally different now. Like they changed after the pandemic as much as anybody else. I think. So I'm only talking about my experience back then. But I think we had a kitchen team of 28 chefs or 26 chefs or something like that. So there's less. Like there's just more people. So there's more time to make everything perfect. Like there's less. Yeah, it's just a little bit more well paced than in other restaurants. Like when in Amsterdam. Amsterdam was a very good example because I was like the lowest. There was four of us, in this in this French kitchen with old school French techniques and 7 canals of cream on a plate and like all the sort of things, and and I was the person who had to do my job and help everyone, and I was under constant pressure all the time. It was basically an impossible job, and I think most kitchen jobs in that sort of environment are. And that's what I fell in love with. I think it suits my personality really well. I'm probably on the cusp of being or on the cusp where you say, like, I think if I would get tested, there would be a reasonable chance that I would get an ADHD diagnosis. Like if I don't really care for it, but for me being in the kitchen, like there's this necessary focus that just allows me to be in the zone. Like I am not made for a school for like what do you say like university environment or whatever, because my mind starts to drift like instantly when I'm sitting down in a classroom. And the kitchen allows me to just focus, and so for me that's really good. Yeah, but anyway, I've drifted from your question. The difference was just that there was just a little bit more time to really make sure that everything is perfect in Key. And it was a nice kitchen environment. Like Key is a really nice kitchen environment. Like the chefs, like Peter Gilmore is a really generous and calm person. So there's no shouting or bullying or whatever going on. And like right now, they of course have Tim and Troy as the 2 head chefs who are just, as far as I'm concerned, amazing people, So
I want to just go back to the time that you spent on the land in Australia and cooking over fire. Do you have any stories of that sort of the impact that it had on you that time?
Yeah, it changed me quite a bit actually. Like when I was at the farm, I was there for 3.5 months. And it worked like this, that we had like this horse riding school, which is like the farmer taught natural horsemanship. So there was, it was also called the Jackaroo Jellaroo School. So you learned some fencing and whatever, but the main focus was horse riding, and cattle mustering with horses. And so that week there was like a menu, which they had been doing this forever, right? So there was 4 travelers, 4 backpackers, or 4 like visa searchers, like I am, on the farm, who were there to take care of, I don't know, the cleaning of the big shed that everybody slept in, or the maintenance of the horses and the cooking, and just things that had to be done. And I of course took care of the cooking as soon as I walked in, So as soon as I started, I set up a sourdough starter so I could make fresh bread. And then we had lamb off the farm. There was a big vegetable garden that the farmer's wife took care of, which was absolutely great. Like there was lots of vegetables that I could just pick from there. And then we shot kangaroo for meat and some rabbits, and they killed a cow like every half year, whatever, just to freeze meat for that. So you have beef as well. So I could cook with all those things. And every week there was like a menu. So we would eat, I don't know, the first night we would eat like a stew, and the second night. So I changed all those recipes, and that was all cooked over fire. So I cooked everything like over fire. And then the week that we did not have a school on, there was still the 4 of us, So I would cook for the 4 of us every day, like in the off week. And it just changed my focus from restaurant cooking to family cooking, which is very different. Like it's just about, I don't know, it's about feeding a family. Like it was really nice to just sit down every day with the 4 of us at the table and eat the food that I cooked. It was a very different experience. That was very much mimicked, sorry to interrupt, very much mimicked by the first lockdown for me. Like the first lockdown for me was similar. Like I was in a house with like 4 of us, and I was home every day cooking for the 4 of us, and we played games, card games, and amazing.
How did the job at Yellow come about?
So it's eventually, of course, you go through all the sponsorship, and you get a visa, you get a permanent residence, and then you start to, I worked at Key for 4 years, so it was time to move on, And then Mark, who you also know, a good friend of mine, he said, "You want to talk to Brent Savage?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And then I talked to Brent, and we hit it off pretty well immediately, I think. And as it just so happened that they were looking for a new head chef at Yellow at that time, so he offered me that job, and off we went. And then 2 months later, we were in lockdown. Yeah. Actually, funny. Like what happened was, I came on board, and look, I did not have a day off sick in like 13 years at that stage. Like forever. And this guy walks in the kitchen like a chef who with mumps disease that everybody thinks is eradicated, but he had mumps disease, and he infected me with mumps disease. So literally 2 weeks in, I had to be off for 10 days because I had mumps disease, which is incredibly contagious. And then I came back into the kitchen, and then I think 5 days later we were locked down. Like it was crazy.
What was it like for you transitioning into that head chef role? Was it challenging at first?
Yeah, I'm still not sure if I've completely grasped it. Like it's hard to it's hard to accept that you did enough work when you were not just under pressure the entire day. Like that's. I mean, I'm not sure. That's just how I feel about it. It's like when I like at the moment with some holidays, and like we're getting a new person in the team, like we're just about to have a full team again, but we just had like we were a little bit short for a couple of weeks, and I had to be in the kitchen like just cooking every day from morning till evening, cooking all day and getting stuff done. And it's just what I am used to see as work. So it feels like I've accomplished something in the end of the day. But actually that's not right, because I've not actually accomplished the things that I need to accomplish. Like as a head chef, I have different roles than just smashing out mise en place, So, and that is a little bit difficult for me personally to just accept. Yeah. And look, I get very good support from the people at Bentley, the Bentley company, and they are very clear in telling me that I have to change my ways a little bit, in that sense, because it's like I just need to accept that my role is also other things. Which I look, I don't think I'm performing badly. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying like that is my difficulty. Like that's what I find difficult.
Nick Hildebrand and Brent Savage have made an incredible impact on Australia's culinary landscape. What are they like to work with for you?
Great. Yeah, absolutely great. Yeah, like I think like I hit it off with Brent pretty much straight away. Like that first conversation was good, and like that has not changed, you know. And Brent really much take care of the kitchen, and Nick really much take care of the front of house. It is so that I have quite a lot of, like, we have a very good front of house team as well, Yellow, that like there's a bit of a good synergy between the front and back. And the barman, the current barman, he's really working a lot on non-alcoholic pairings, and I've sort of got involved with that as well, you know, like we try to do certain fermentations. We now try to, you know, we make kombucha, we make water kafirs. We try and push that to a place where the non-alcoholic drinks have as much of a flavor intensity as you might get in wine, you know. So that's very interesting. So in that sense, I have quite a lot. You know, we work together very closely, front and back at Yellow. But Nick is my main dealings are with Brent, and I have a very good relationship with Brent.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
You weren't expecting to stay in Australia, but you're building an incredible life here and making an amazing impact at Yellow. What do you love about what you do?
Look, you work in food, and you like food a lot, right? And everything that is around it. Like, I think there's just infinite possibility to develop. You know, like every time you start something new, or you read on a different cuisine, or you learn about anything. Like bread is a good example. You know, you start to learn about bread. You know, you might think that you know how to make bread, but you start to learn about bread, and you just realize that you know absolutely nothing. You know, like the modernist guys, the modernist cuisine guys, they wrote a 5-volume book on bread, and they still have questions. You know, so that's what I like most about cooking. Yeah, and then of course what's really nice, like the kitchens are incredible. Kitchens and restaurants are incredible environments with so many different people from so many different walks of life. As I shared the story about the pastry kitchen in London, you know, like where do all these people come from? How do they all end up together in one team? You know, and how does, you know, it's incredible. Like I think there's not many places where you will find the same, you know, like if you go into a marketing office, a marketing management office, all these people will have followed, of course, this is a generalization and not always true, but all these people will have followed generally a pretty similar path, you know. They go through high school, then they go through university, and they go through a couple of media jobs, marketing jobs, and then they end up wherever they end up, and then they grow into the corporate ladder. But that's not really how it works in hospitality, you know. People are from all ages. They find that this is what they want to do now, and then they come into the kitchen, and there's so many different characters. It's amazing.
Well, it's amazing to catch up with you, Sander, and an absolute honour to have you on Deep in the Weeds today. Good luck with everything at Yellow, and please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Okay, thank you, Huck.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.